The evening began like countless others in our house. Quiet, ordinary, the kind of night that hardly leaves a trace in memory. Daniel had just left for his night shift at the precinct, his uniform still carrying the faint scent of starch and aftershave as he kissed my cheek in that hurried, distracted way of his. He promised to be back before sunrise, though both of us knew that promise was fragile. When the front door shut behind him, the silence settled in, heavy and familiar. I turned off the kitchen light, rinsed the last coffee cup, and prepared myself for another stretch of solitude. Loneliness had become something of a companion over the years, always lurking when Daniel's work pulled him away. I told myself I was used to it, that it was the cost of loving a man married just as much to duty as to me. But that night, something small and unplanned shifted the balance of everything. I should explain. Matthew, my 19-year-old stepson, had been living with us for nearly a year. Tall, broad-shouldered, still learning how to carry his adult frame, he often oscillated between confidence and a boyish uncertainty that reminded me of his age. His mother lived several states away, so most days it was just the three of us, navigating the delicate choreography of a blended family. Matthew and I had always maintained a careful respect for one another. I wasn't his mother, nor did I try to be, but over time I had become something in between, a confidant when he needed one, a quiet presence when he didn't. For Daniel, this arrangement seemed ideal. He believed his son had adjusted well, that our household was stable. But beneath the surface, I sensed a tension neither of us spoke aloud, the isolation that both Matthew and I felt in Daniel's absence. It was that tension that hummed in the background the night I wandered upstairs, moving through the dim hallway more out of restlessness than purpose. I paused outside Matthew's room, hesitating for reasons I couldn't quite name. The door was closed, but a strip of light bled out beneath it. Normally I would have knocked. Respecting his space had always been important, but some impulse, subtle and insistent, made me turn the knob without warning. The sight that met me froze me in place. Matthew, startled, spun in his chair, his face pale under the cold blue glow of his computer screen. His reaction was sharper than embarrassment alone could explain, his eyes wide with something closer to fear. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, the silence charged and brittle. And in that silence, I realized this was not a trivial intrusion. Whatever Matthew was hiding, whatever I had just stumbled into, was bound to change the fragile balance of our household. I didn't know it then, but opening that door meant opening something far greater, something that would test loyalties, unravel certainties, and expose the fault lines none of us had dared to face. My name is Claire, and for years I convinced myself I was living a steady, dependable life. Marriage to Daniel promised me exactly that: stability, order, a sense of permanence. After the turbulence of my 20s, when choices often felt reckless and love fleeting, Daniel's calm demeanor had seemed like salvation. He was grounded, disciplined, the kind of man who thrived on routine. And in his way, he loved me. But his love was measured in silences, in late nights at the precinct, in weary nods over dinner before exhaustion pulled him to bed. I told myself I could live with that. What I hadn't expected was how sharp loneliness can feel when it's wrapped in normalcy. It gnaws quietly, disguised as ordinary evenings, until one day you wake up and realize it's been years since someone truly looked at you. Into that silence came Matthew, Daniel's son from his first marriage. At 19, he carried the contradictions of youth, broad shoulders that suggested strength, paired with the uncertainty of someone not yet sure of his place in the world. His mother lived far away, and so he became a permanent figure in our home, filling the spaces Daniel often left empty. Our relationship was careful, respectful. I was not his mother, nor did I wish to compete with her ghost. Instead, I found myself inhabiting an in-between role, sometimes a listener, sometimes a quiet guide, sometimes simply the only person around to notice his presence. He, in turn, offered small glimpses of trust, stories about classes, frustrations about friends, and questions he was too hesitant to bring to his father. Yet even as those conversations built a kind of bond, I recognized the danger of it. We were both reaching for connection, both living under the same roof, but orbiting around Daniel's absence. That shared loneliness, unspoken but palpable, created a thread between us neither of us dared to name. The night I opened his door, that thread tightened. His expression, shock, fear, a vulnerability that felt too raw, told me that what I had walked into was not trivial. It was a secret heavy enough to unsettle the fragile balance of our household, and in that instant, I understood. Matthew was not just a boy fumbling through adolescence. He was a young man carrying burdens too large for his years. What those burdens were, I did not yet know. But I knew this. Pretending nothing had happened was impossible. That moment at his doorway had shifted something fundamental, pulling us both into a current neither of us was prepared to navigate. And so, beneath the roof of our quiet suburban home, with Daniel oblivious to the storm gathering, the story of betrayal and discovery began to take shape. Its first tremors barely felt, but certain to shake us all. The days following that night carried a weight I couldn't easily shake. Each time Matthew entered the room, I felt the memory of his startled expression pressing against me, as if the air itself remembered what I had seen. I wanted to dismiss it, to convince myself it was nothing, but the silence between us told a different story. Matthew avoided me at first. His footsteps upstairs were hurried, his bedroom door shut more firmly than usual. At dinner, he answered questions with clipped responses, his eyes fixed on his plate. Daniel, tired from his shifts, hardly noticed. To him, Matthew's withdrawal was just another sign of a teenager retreating into his own world. But to me, the shift was unmistakable. This was not mere adolescent moodiness. It was fear, and maybe something deeper. One evening, when Daniel left for another late shift, I found Matthew in the kitchen, rinsing dishes in the sink. The tension hung between us like static. I tried for casualness. "You don't have to do that. I'll take care of it." He didn't look at me. "It's fine." His voice was flat, but his hands trembled slightly as the plate slipped against the running water. "Matthew," I said, softer now. "You don't have to be afraid of me." That made him pause. Slowly, he set the plate aside and turned, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe, or the ache of carrying a secret too long. "You saw more than you should have," he murmured. I shook my head. I saw someone who looked terrified. That's what I can't stop thinking about. The words seemed to disarm him. He exhaled, shoulders sinking, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. "I don't know how to explain it," he admitted. "It's not just what I was doing. It's everything. I feel like I'm failing him, failing myself. And then you—" He stopped abruptly, biting back whatever he had been about to confess. The silence that followed was sharp, almost unbearable. My instinct told me to press him, but another part of me, the part that understood the fragility of confession, held me back. Instead, I said, "You're not failing me." His eyes flicked up then, meeting mine for the briefest moment, and in that look was a dangerous recognition. We both knew we were carrying more than we should. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, I replayed the exchange over and over. His words, his hesitation, the unspoken sentence that dangled in the air. I felt it lingering, unresolved. And for the first time, I feared that the secret between us was no longer just his. What I didn't realize then was that silence itself can be the most treacherous of choices. Each unspoken word, each restrained confession, was tightening the knot between us. And eventually, something bound that tightly has no choice but to snap. The breaking point arrived quietly, not with shouting or discovery, but in the stillness of a house too familiar with silence. Daniel was on another overnight shift, and the living room felt cavernous with only the soft glow of a lamp casting shadows against the walls. I sat curled on the couch with a book open in my lap, though I hadn't turned a page in nearly an hour. Matthew entered hesitantly, barefoot, his hair slightly disheveled as though he'd paced his room before deciding to come down. He lingered near the doorway, shifting his weight as if preparing to retreat. "You can sit," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. He moved slowly, lowering himself onto the armchair across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, waited with everything unsaid since that night at his door. Finally, he broke it. "I don't know how to carry this anymore." His voice cracked, low and raw. I set the book aside, my chest tightening. "Carry what?" His eyes met mine, and in them I saw the storm he'd been hiding. The feeling that I'm invisible to him. That no matter what I do, it's never enough. And then there's you. You actually see me. That scares me more than anything. The words lodged in my throat. My instinct told me to correct him, to put distance back where it belonged. But honesty, unbidden and dangerous, slipped out instead. It scares me too. The admission changed the air between us. The careful boundary I had been holding on to dissolved in a single breath. He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, eyes fixed on me with a vulnerability that made him seem younger and older all at once. "I think I care about you more than I should," he whispered. Time stilled. My pulse roared in my ears. Every sensible part of me screamed to shut it down, to push him away, to protect not just him but myself. But another part, hungry, aching, so tired of being unseen, answered before reason could intervene. I feel it too. The confession hovered between us, dangerous and irreversible. We didn't move closer, didn't touch, but the silence that followed was louder than any embrace could have been. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. Whatever we were becoming, we could no longer pretend it wasn't real. When Matthew finally stood, retreating to the safety of his room, I sat motionless on the couch, trembling. The living room was unchanged, yet everything felt different. A boundary had been crossed, not with hands but with words, and words, once spoken, cannot be undone. I knew then that the quiet betrayal had already begun. In the days that followed, I carried our confession like a fragile shard of glass, hidden but sharp enough to cut me at every turn. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Meals were shared. The television murmured in the evenings. Daniel came and went with the same weary rhythm. Yet beneath the surface, the silence between Matthew and me was charged, alive, dangerous. I avoided his gaze at the dinner table, only to catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Small exchanges became laced with meaning. His good night too heavy, my take care too soft. It was as if we were speaking in a secret language composed entirely of restraint. But secrets are not sustainable. They grow heavier with each passing day, demanding space until the weight becomes unbearable. I sensed Matthew felt it too. His laughter with friends sounded forced, his shoulders slumped with unspoken tension. He had given voice to what lay between us, and now the truth echoed in every corner of the house. One evening, he broke the stalemate. "I can't stay here," he said, his voice steady but his hands curled into fists at his sides. I froze. "What do you mean?" "I applied to a college out of state," he admitted. "I didn't tell Dad yet. But I need distance, Claire, for both of us. If I stay, we'll keep crossing lines we can't uncross." The finality in his words struck me like a blow. My chest ached with conflicting emotions. Relief, grief, even pride at his courage. I wanted to beg him to stay, to tell him we could manage this storm together. But I knew he was right. Sometimes the bravest act is not holding on, but letting go. When the day of his departure arrived, Daniel beamed with paternal pride, convinced his son was simply chasing opportunity. I stood beside him, smiling faintly, my heart breaking quietly inside. Matthew hugged his father first, then turned to me. For a fleeting moment his hand lingered against mine, an unspoken goodbye, a recognition of everything we couldn't say aloud. And then he was gone. The house settled into a quieter silence after that, one less charged but lonelier still. Daniel noticed my distance but never questioned it, too absorbed in his work to sense the storm I had weathered alone. Looking back, I understand now that the true betrayal wasn't in the words spoken or the glances exchanged. It was in the loneliness that hollowed out a marriage, in the silence that left two people reaching for each other in desperation. Matthew left to build a new life, and I remained, still bound to mine. Yet the echo of what we almost became lingers, a reminder of how fragile the human heart can be when starved of connection. And sometimes, I wonder, Was it a mistake we narrowly escaped? Or a truth we simply didn't have the courage to claim?